All right.
Yeah.
So we're going to be in Luke 11. We've kind of been going through this for a few weeks now on our usual pace. So we're picking up with verse 37. You want to give us an overview here, Chris?
So this is, again, continuing from the previous discourse, so don't miss the connection to what Jesus was talking about with spiritual blindness versus spiritual sight, light versus darkness, don't hide your light. So Luke is taking these things and he's assembling them here, and where Matthew has it kind of all in different places. So some of Matthew had it in the Sermon on the Mount in Galilee. A lot of what we're going to talk about tonight and probably the next week, Matthew has at the end of his ministry, after he's entered into Jerusalem on Palm Sunday, and then he has this discourse where he has these woes, and they're arranged a little bit differently. And so there's just some interesting, the scholars like to debate, okay, is this one or the other getting it wrong, or is this two separate events? I tend to see, just knowing from my own history as a speaker who corporate training and we go to different cities, I would say essentially the same thing at each site, but it wouldn't, if you held a transcript up, it would look like two different times. So I think this episode we see here that Luke has it in his house and they're dining, whereas in Matthew it's a crowd is assembling and is very public. Some differences there, although they're very similar.
Okay. Well, go ahead and just start then, Brad. You want to see who wants to read 37 through 40, Luke 11? We have a volunteer? Or go ahead, you can read.
Yeah, I'll read first and then we'll go to volunteers. And as he spoke, a certain Pharisee asked him to dine with him. Went in and sat down. The Pharisee saw it. He marveled that he had not washed before dinner. Then him, now you Pharisees make the outward is full of greed and wickedness, foolish ones. Do not he who made the outside, did not he who made the outside make the inside also.
Okay, a couple of things here. Just in context, lest you think that the Lord came in with hands and didn't wash up, I think he's meaning we're here ceremonial washing,
yes,
right? So they went through this whole process, and if you know a little about the culture, they had to baptize the dish before they ate on it, and there's a lot here. It's not just didn't use soap like you would your children after they've been playing outside and they come in to eat, right?
There's a lot going on here, and it would be really easy for me to geek out and just spend a lot of time talking about this because Jesus is answering different sets of Pharisees. They had different opinions, and so he's answering one of, which is fascinating for a geek too. You may not find it so exciting, so I'll skip that. But it's fascinating. One thing that Pharisees would only do is they would only dine with someone who they thought was a Pharisee. And that's fascinating here because they think somehow, some way, they're connected with Jesus as he aligns with us. He thinks like I do, so he's okay for me to dine with. Because they wouldn't dine, even if, other types of Jewish believers, Jewish in that day, they wouldn't necessarily dine with them. Because if they thought that, they're on the outside, they're not following the true faith, they're unclean, so I'm not going to eat with them. But this Pharisee does here. And it's fascinating, and we know that, of course, Paul came from the Pharisees. There's a guy named Gamaliel or Gamaliel, depending on where you put the vowels, in chapter 5, who was the head of this school of Pharisees that said, hey, leave them alone. If they're with God, there's nothing you can do to stop them. And so that's kind of a curious statement for the leader of this large sect of Pharisees to make. The Chosen is picking up on this if you watch that, and of course it's fictionalized, but they're getting it pretty close on these different thoughts, and you had all these different factions of Pharisees, and sometimes they align on certain things, and sometimes they divide on other things. So all of that's going on here, and the way Jesus responds tells someone who's dug into this a little bit, he's renouncing one Pharisees and saying another group of Pharisees, and of course he goes much deeper because his response is about the outside of the dish, and that's where they divided over that. What's curious though is he uses the term here, baptismo, and so this is not just about hand washing. This is this group wanted and expected full immersion before eating with meals. You pick up on that in Mark 7, which is kind of a similar passage. When they came from the marketplace, they completely cleansed themselves. So this isn't just you didn't use the right soap or you didn't use hand sanitizer. This is, they expected this degree of being clean. And of course, Jesus calls them out saying this is just external only.
Right. I mean, and if you think about it, at least this is my thought, is focused with the external, that they probably only invited, based on the heart we see here, and this may not have been the case with all of them, but he probably invited Jesus because it was popular, right? So they're willing to compromise to get a little favor with the people, right? So we're going to let Jesus come eat with us, right? Because they're so focused on the outward You know, and before we go throwing stones, a lot of us are so focused on the outward, so focused on what people think of us or what they don't think of us. And sometimes we're so focused on what other people think of us, we lose track of what thinks of us, right? And that happens to a lot of people, you know. And we're in a church, and church hurt is a real thing, right? People hurt in church all the time, right? So there's that is on us. We're flawed people, right? But we need to be right with God, okay, and to the possible right with others. But we don't need to be so concerned about the outside of the inside, because at the end of the day, we're a child of God, right? Or so that's where our value is on the inside of the cup.
Yeah, Jesus says here, your inward part is full of greed and wickedness. So it's like the cup can be the cleanest cup you've ever seen, but their heart is not right. And you picked up, I think we both picked up on the passage in 1 Samuel 16. This is where Samuel is going to anoint the next king. He doesn't know who it is. He just knows he's supposed to go to Jesse's house in Bethlehem. All right, let's line all your sons up. Nope. Right, and he gets to Eliab and says, this is the one. How tall he is. How, surely this is the Lord's anointed. What does God say? God does not see as man sees. Man looks at the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart. And there you get this difference that David is going with all of his flaws. David is that person has the heart that seeks after God. And again, God sees this even though he's a little shepherd. And so this is just this different mindset, this kingdom type of mindset that believers have. We know this is just external. The true nature is what's inside.
And we're doing a Deuteronomy study on Sunday mornings, and it's fascinating to me how consistent the Lord was. It's not like this heart thing that Jesus is talking about here is all this new. It was way back then. Does that sound familiar? Anybody in here? Like, do we ever do that? It's easier to focus outside, right, than to look in the mirror. Go, oh, it's their problem, not my problem. It's just me.
Another kind of in Luke chapter 7 is the sinful woman comes in at the banquet, and the host said to himself, this man knew the type of woman who was, he wouldn't be allowing this, right? He says it to himself, and yeah, that's right.
Yeah, now you remember.
We acted that out.
We acted it out.
And Jesus says, Simon, let's talk about that. And he's like, what? I didn't say anything. Well, because he saw it, didn't say anything, he just marveled inside. Jesus says, let's talk about this.
Yet they're looking for a sign.
Yes.
Right? It's crazy. Okay, look.
Such things as you have. That you.
Let's talk about this for a second. Does God really need your gifts? Okay, it's not like God's bad. He owns the cattle on. Does that mean literally 1,000? No, it means every, right? So he has more resources. So you have to ask yourself, why? Why does God want to do that? Why does God ask for that? Well, God asked for that for our own good. Stingy, it's going to make us wicked, affect our heart, right? If our hands are closed, how can you receive? You can't, right? You need open hands to receive from God. There's an old saying that, God doesn't bless cul-de-sacs, right? Okay, not against you if you live in a cul-de-sac. Cul-de-sac isn't a through street, right? So if you give there, it doesn't through, right? Frustration, and that's what he wants. Right? So if you're giving, then your hand is open, the blessings he can trust with you. If your hand is closed, then he can't trust you yet with blessings, right? Does that make sense? Go ahead.
They're more concerned about the cleanliness than they are what can I do with what's in the cup to help my neighbor.
Right.
And that's one of the layers. There's a lot of layers in this little section, but that's one. Right? These give of such things that you have, and you mentioned stingy. I think that's one of our traps that I went into is, hey, this is mine, I earned it. Well, no, you didn't actually. We need to give it away, and that's the rich young ruler, right? One thing he couldn't part with as well. Wealth was his God, and that was he couldn't part. So not that.
So, no. So, who knows what God's test is in Matthew 25 for the sheep and the goats? The sheep from the goats in Matthew 5. Right. So what did he say? He said they said, but we cast out demons, we did this, we were sick, we proclaimed, we did all these things. And he says, go away, depart from, I never knew you. And what did the other group say? He said, I'm paraphrasing, come into my kingdom. He says, what did we do? And he said, you gave a cold cup to those that are thirsty. You visited me when I was in prison, right? You gave me food when I was hungry, right? And then he says, well, we never saw you. When you did it for the least of these, you did me, right? That's the test, right? He gave us the test. In Matthew 25, the Pharisees are failing the test. And focusing on that, they're taking a mint leaf and a tweezers, and they're counting out the leaves on their mint, going, okay, I've counted 20, 10% is, so I've got 2 mint leaves so that I can be leaves. But they had made it all about the mint leaves instead of doing what they should to the people that are all around them, right?
14, the whole law is fulfilled in one word, in a statement, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. And so keep the whole law, but forget that, and you're not keeping it. Well, James says who was guilty of one part is guilty of breaking the whole thing. And so aren't keeping the love your neighbor part. The second, the greatest commandment, love the Lord your God. So.
Absolutely. Okay, 40.
But woe to you, Pharisees, for you tithe mint and rue and all manner of herbs, and pass by justice and the love of God, those you ought to have done, without leaving the others undone.
I think I already kind of dead horse, didn't I? I think I got a little ahead of myself there.
So we'll talk about this more and then more next Wednesday, but there's 6 of these woes. And the first here is ritualism without love, just empty procedures that we follow. And again, like we say, it's easy to point fingers at these guys, but let's examine our lives to see where we might be doing these things. I always find this funny. The word for woe it's the opposite of blessing. So when Jesus says, blessed are the poor, woe is sort of the opposite of that. The word in Hebrew is literally oi. So when you hear someone say oi, that means whoa, where the word comes from. And so I geek out at that too, so I find that funny. So don't neglect these things. Tithing is in God's law, and if God said it, it's a good thing. But you're missing why we're doing these things. That's the second part of what we'll talk about on Sunday. Okay, what's the why behind this? And there's an order that they follow in Deuteronomy, and the law is supposed to come at the end. It's, you love God, and you seek God, and you search God, and you follow God, and then out of that, like Galatians says, you love your neighbor, and then you can't help the law because you're in lockstep with where God wants you to be. We have this analogy that comes up from time to time in our Deuteronomy class. Focus on the pins, right? If you're bowling and you focus on the pins, you don't have to worry about the gutter. Unless you're a bowler like I am, and then I'm in time. But we have the bumpers up, right?
Yeah, I need the bumpers.
I haven't had the guts to ask for the bumpers.
Yeah.
I may. But if you seek first the righteousness, the gutters are let you know when you've gone outside the boundaries, and the idea is to get you back.
So from an application standpoint, a bad thing or when when they become your God, that's a good answer. Anybody else? What? When it becomes listic? Right. That's a big one, right? I mean, take for instance the Lord's Prayer. I mean, how many people recite it but understand, I mean, even in good right there, and I'm not, obviously the word's always good, but you need to have the heart of it, right? You don't want to repeat, things just for word's sake, right? God's more interested in your heart. If I came home to Heather each night and she told the exact same thing every night, our relationship would probably not well, right? So how many of y'all in your prayer life, when you meet with God, are you talking about something different, right? Or are you talking about the same thing every night, right? And sometimes if you're hitting a wall, maybe you're talking about the wrong thing. Maybe God wants you to talk about something else, or maybe he wants you to listen, right? You ever been there? I have, right? Where I'm praying, and I'm like a stuck record, and I'm on something, and God's on a whole different page. I'm bug or something, and that dog ain't hunting, right? And sometimes I just got to stop, and I got to, okay, God, I'm obviously out of step because I know you're not. So what do I need to be doing here, right?
And so they were saying the justice and the love of God, and the word for the Greek word agape, the agapeo, the verb. And that's going to be interesting when we get to this verse, which I don't know if we're going to have time to get to it tonight. But they're missing, Deuteronomy says to focus on. Deuteronomy 16. Most of our translations say justice and only justice shall pursue and possess the land which the Lord your God is giving to you. It doesn't say, keep the law and God will bring us. Pursue justice. And the Hebrew word is actually righteousness. Pursue that. Micah 6:8, he has told you what is good and what the Lord is to do justice, to love kindness, and to walk humbly with your God. You can tithe all you're guilty of what Jesus is talking about here, and so am I. I'll do one more.
Agree. So somebody want to read 43, and then we'll wrap up.
Okay, so woe to you, Pharisee, love the best seats in the synagogues and greetings in the marketplaces.
So this is talking about pride. This is the woe number 2. Woe number 1 is empty rituals. Woe number 2 is pride. And, if we're honest, is there any of us that don't, at some point, have struggled with pride? I know it's me. Maybe it's just me. But I think this is like, hey, this is not good, right? Because pride is just our nature. And it's not a good nature. They're seeking honor. I said the word in verse 42 is God's agape love. It's the same word. They're agapeing the seats in the synagogue, and that's like the highest form of love that we think is, you're totally given over to this. It's not just that, I prefer the best seat. No, they're like, this is a goal, is to have those seats. And I know you've got to worry about, you're in my seat. Let us never be like that, right? Let's take this literally for a moment. Don't love these pews, or, I guess it'd be Baptists, you love the back seats in the synagogue. So you've got
I told
this,
Heather, we're not going back to this church. And then I got corrected. We went back to that church. God must have wanted us there for some reason, but.
And then these personal greetings were these elaborate rituals. Oh, blessed of the Lord. Depending on the higher the status of the person, the more ostentatious these blessings got, or these greetings got. And so this is like this prideful, this speaking to our flesh, and tell me how great I am. Keep going, please. Don't stop. It's that here. And when we we'll get there someday, is we'll see the synagogues have nice, sort of like the first class seats on an airline. How this is a real thing that our flesh just seeks after. There's something about it that wants attention and wants accolades.
We still have that today. I mean, even I got married, I think I've told this before, in Jamaica. And he says, "Oh, God, and he had this whole thing, and he goes, and partner, because he was so worried about them in the wedding, right? So, and that's not just a picture of us, right? We get carried away with the outside that we miss, right? And we somehow or another make it about us. It's like you're humble. You say you're humble, you're prideful. You're taking pride in being humble, right? So
it's hard to be humble when you're perfect in every way.
Exactly. Okay, with Chris's thought here, what agape, or what if someone else looking at you, your life, would they say that you agape? Right? For me, it might be iced tea today, as many times as I went back to the picture. Okay.
And pursuits and hobbies, those are fine. They're good. Is it getting in the way of your relationship? And are people drawing conclusions about us when we're supposed to be representing Christ about the things we do or the pursuits we have? It's all of this is just to keep it in balance. Tithing is good, but remember the heart. Things is okay. Having hobbies, but just keep the self nature of it in check.
Just whether you have, God bless you, whether you have the hobby or the hobby has you.
Yeah.
Right? So sometimes you have to ask those questions. Okay, you want to pray us out, Chris?
Heavenly Father, we just thank you and we praise you for this time, and we just love the fact that the praise and prayer time went long tonight, and that's why we're here, Lord, to gather up and to be your body, to be your community, and to be your fellowship.